are back to record another episode of the Ops Leader Roundtable brought to you by Instawork. Really excited for our conversation today. We're going to be chatting with Glen Wegel of Kitchen Cabinet Distributors, also an active member of the WERC organization. That's how we got connected. Glen, how's everything going today on this glorious Monday?
Doing great. Thanks for asking.
Cool. Well, let's kick it off. I wanted to hear a little bit about your role and what Kitchen Cabinet Distributors does and some of the products that you guys make.
Sure. We can talk a little bit about that. So I am the Vice President of Operations for Kitchen Cabinet Distributors. We go by KCD for short. And at KCD, we strive to be the leading provider of cabinetry solutions to our partners throughout the United States through a commitment to outstanding service, uncompromising quality, consistent availability, and a collaborative approach to growing our partners' businesses. And to that extent, we provide thoughtful products and exceptional service to inspire space where people love to live. Essentially, we distribute ready-to-assemble cabinetry to cabinetry dealers, suppliers, and remodelers across the country within 48 hours of them placing an order. Sadly, we don't sell directly to the general public, but I know a few people if you need a referral or reference for our cabinets. I mean, perhaps you've heard of the Property Brothers. Maybe not, but our cabinetry has been featured on over a dozen episodes of their shows on HGTV, as well as a few other TV shows. And if you're a fan of Chris Angel, the Las Vegas magician, our cabinets adorn his dressing room and his VIP meet and greet area, which is a direct compliment to the quality of our products, as well as the diligence of our marketing team. And with that said, I got to take a moment. I got to brag on our planning and procurement team as, they've kept 4 distribution centers full of cabinetry despite the supply chain challenges we felt across the country in the past couple of years. And another brag on our operations team as they've been picking and shipping orders within 2 business days throughout the pandemic and even today. And what this means is that with DCs strategically placed around the country, our customers can have an entire home's worth of cabinets received at their shop in about 5 business days, including truck times, which many of our competitors, which they have a very, very nice and a very good product, and I don't want to dissuade anybody because they will give you a beautiful kitchen and some beautiful cabinets, most of which are not shipping within 2 days, but we are.
Awesome. Yeah. Props to your marketing team for arming you with all those tidbits there. Some really interesting use cases. Maybe you'll get me some backstage tickets to Chris Angel next time I go to Vegas for a conference or something, maybe.
Come on out and see us at KBiz. I don't know if the contact is still there for Chris Angel, but his show is worth it if you've never seen it. And if you don't know who he is, check him out on YouTube.
I thought you were going to say you guys produced the cabinet that he disappears to in an onstage show or something.
Let me write that idea down. I think that we can use that in product development. Chris Angel, got it. Disappearing cabinetry, that would be pretty intense.
Yeah, and then make the one that he gets sawed through too. So I know we talked a little bit about your background in logistics, coming from a military background. Tell me a little bit how you got your start and then how you transitioned from being a service member into the private sector.
Sure. I mean, there's really 2 parts to the story. The first part involves the Army and the second part involves college. But the premise of both of these segments is I didn't know I wanted to be involved in logistics when I was starting my career. But I did know that I wanted to be in the Army. It was always my dream to be like others in my family who served. So I joined the Army when I was 17. I mean, I was still in high school, and like so many other young people, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. I mean, I knew I wanted to go to college, but that's because everybody told me you want to go to college, you have to, but you don't. So, I romanticized about some of the typical things like my friends did, like, oh, let's be a pilot like Tom Cruise. Let's be a lawyer. Let's be a doctor. Let's be a pro skateboarder like Tony Hawk, the usual type of things. But when it came to picking a job in the Army, my father, who also served, he gave me some really good advice, which I'd say is applicable to anyone making a choice around education as well, which is pick a job that'll provide you with training that you can use and turn into a job when you get out of the Army. So I became a unit supply specialist, which sounds a ton like being a pro skater. I mean, I could show you my kick flips if you had time, but they're not comparable. But being a unit supply specialist in the Army led me down a path that would become a 15-year career in Army logistics, doing all kinds of cool stuff in some fun and some other not so fun places. So, I got to spend some time in Asia. I got to spend time in the Middle East, Europe, quite a few different states around the U.S. And I mean, you can choose which places you think are fun or not. But if it rhymes with Afghanistan, you'd probably choose my least favorite one. But, that's the story with the Army. So I was promoted multiple times. I had the opportunity to take on roles of continuously increasing responsibility, all of which were great. But about halfway through my service period, I was able to attend the officer candidate school and become an officer, which opened up an even larger opportunity within the logistics world. So my career path in Army logistics had me training and operating in so many diverse areas that some would assume that I'm a jack of all trades. So, I mean, like I did distribution, transportation, water purification, contracting, petroleum operations, maintenance, and aerial delivery, just to name a few. I left out some of the really fun stuff, like vegetation assault, because I don't know how many people really like mowing the lawn, but I promise you, when I was a private, I did a lot of mowing lawns and vegetation assault. But I had a lot of fun in the Army doing all of these different things. Like, I never imagined I'd work on water purification with the Italian Army, or that my teams would be responsible for establishing new distribution centers in remote locations in Afghanistan that were not too far away from the Iranian border, amongst any other number that there's not even enough time to list them all, but it was fun. So the Army got my career in logistics kicked off, but I did say at the beginning there were two parts to the story when we started. So while I was in the Army, I was able to transition to the Army Reserve and attend the University of Florida, go Gators, which is where I received my bachelor's degree. And when I was graduating, I had a degree in history, and I thought, hey, I'd really like to be a teacher. I like teaching, and history was cool because I like to talk about history. And so, I applied for a few jobs, interviewed for a few jobs, got a few offers, and I quickly realized that a teacher's salary in Florida was not going to do it to pay my bills. Between working at a supermarket and my Army Reserve pay, I was facing a pay cut. So while at a Gator game, I was having a chat with my best friend's stepmother, and she suggested that with all my Army experience in logistics and now having a degree, that I should throw my resume out to the world and see what sticks. So kind of to align you, this was about 6 years into that 15-year Army career. And she was right. I received multiple offers in the distribution and logistics space, and I haven't looked back yet. So kind of to summarize, I worked within one career field that I've been a part of since I was 17 years old. Logistics, go figure. I still work in that space now. I absolutely love it. And if anybody is listening that maybe is not working in the logistics space or is thinking about a career in logistics, operations, distribution, I highly encourage it and promise you, no 2 days are the same, and you will find a lot of good things along the path.
Awesome. Yeah, that's quite a story. I mean, obviously a natural jump from your service background and focusing on logistics into doing it in a warehouse environment. Let's come back to the idea of getting into a career in logistics and warehousing. We'll come back to that in a little while. But tell me a little bit about your operations currently. You mentioned you guys have 4 distribution centers. What's the footprint like there? How did you guys arrive at that sort of network strategy?
So first off, I'm very proud of our operational footprint and the growth that we've experienced over the past few years. When I joined KCD in early 2018, we only had one distribution center in Raleigh, which it's still in place and doubles as our corporate headquarters. But each of our DCs is roughly in the ballpark of 200,000 square feet, and they stock every item that we distribute. Other than our Raleigh DC, we have one in Houston, Texas, Reno, Nevada, and Orlando, Florida. So our strategy here is regional fulfillment of all products. With these DCs located where they're at, KCD is enabled to ship to 99% of the US population within 3 business days. So if you think about how important timing is for the building supplies industry, or any industry for that matter, we give customers peace of mind in terms of predictability and repeatability of service, not to mention support and quick shipping if during the installation process an item is accidentally damaged or they forgot to order something. One of our regional DCs is pretty close by, and we can ship what they need pretty quickly.
Yeah, I know I have a friend getting their kitchen redone right now and was a victim of poor timelines and contractors not getting things on time. So obviously it's super critical for your end customers to know what's coming, when it's coming, and then fulfill anything that extra that's needed. Within your different DCs, what does a typical volume look like? So I think you mentioned it's not a traditional, holiday peak like some customers, like some operators experience. What does your year look like in terms of how volume flows out of the distribution centers?
You're correct about our business not having that typical holiday peak, which I don't miss from being in previous organizations that did. However, we do see a little bit of a pickup in business typically after the holiday season and after the KBIS show ends, which KBIS is the kitchen and bath industry show, which is the largest kitchen and bath show, if not in the world, definitely in the United States. So otherwise, we're fulfilling a myriad of orders daily across the country as people conclude that a new kitchen is more feasible and affordable than they probably thought before. And similar to your friend's experience with the delays in their kitchen, my wife and I, we redid our kitchen probably about a year and a half ago. They were done in and out between demo, cleanup, and installation and countertops all within 5 days. We didn't have any blemishes. I guess the order ticket had my name on it, so everybody made sure everything was perfect, and the designers probably looked at it 3 times just to make sure. But I would assume my mother would have the same experience, and actually they did, because when my parents redid their kitchen, I didn't tell our internal team that my parents were ordering kitchens through one of our dealers down in Florida, and they didn't have any issues either.
Obviously, we're focused here on this podcast about the labor market and trying to understand the workforce landscape within the operations and logistics space. Tell me a little bit about the mix of workers you use at your different distribution centers. What are you finding in the last year in terms of how the market's improved, gotten worse? What's changing? It's always an interesting topic to break down.
Yeah, the labor market is, pretty tough. I've heard through social media or the news that the labor market's improving, but I will tell you at all 4 of our sites, we have not experienced that. I mean, we've had to get creative with recruiting over the past 2 years, especially today. We have north of 150 associates, and every one of them is our best recruiter. I'm not sure that this is the most creative thing being done or the most creative approach to recruiting new talent, but we're offering bonuses for associates who get new folks to join the company, and most commonly, we've been using the temp to perm hiring process to fill vacancies. So it's worked out for us overall, albeit there are moments of stress at times, but we've yet to fail to meet customer expectations or not meeting our internal service level goals.
Yeah, I know whenever I've spoken with other ops leaders, recruiting and referrals is a huge piece of that. Certainly when we talk about our flexible labor network, referrals are our number one driver of new workers signing up. So that word of mouth is huge. I guess a question I like to ask people is whether they've tried any sort of non-traditional recruiting tactics, looking in areas that you might not have before or hadn't been forced to look before. Whether it's we've heard everything from the local, firehouse to universities to refugee communities. Anything less traditional that you've tried to try to fill open positions that you have?
So we've worked with the state and local unemployment agencies to look for folks that are underemployed or are not employed, and we've had a little bit of success there. Not as much success reaching out to some of the traditionally disenfranchised communities. I was attending it was at the WERC's annual conference. It was just talking about labor and the distribution environment this past summer, and we were talking about how different companies were trying different things, and I was impressed with some of the things that peer organizations are trying. One of which they were offering. What is it called? They were offering sabbaticals for their employees. So if you were there for so many years, every 5 years, you get like a 1-month sabbatical paid by the company. And their turnover was so just little that it was insane. I was like, wow, that's a really good idea. It has a large upfront cost, but I think the tendency that people forget is that in times when labor is plentiful, they take advantage of that. And when labor is tight, they forget that we kind of have to get back to basics and ensure that we're creating the best environment for folks that they want to come work there. Like, make yourself an employer of choice. We do that with vendors and customers. We work very hard at those relationships, but a lot of folks can't say that they're working that hard for employees or potential employees. And we've done a lot of that, getting back to basics with our employees at KCD. Distinctly during the pandemic, when things were a little bit tougher, we were supplying people with meals to take home to their family, just to kind of help fill the gaps, because a lot of folks were, without employment or significantly underemployed, or they found themselves struggling where their children were out of school and maybe they weren't able to get meals for their children. We try to go, the extra step there. Sometimes we do some different, bring in different speakers, or have different avenues for people to come in and talk to and say, oh, well, you want to buy your first home. Let's talk about that. Here's a retirement planning conversation. Like, we've brought in people from the brokerage group that represents our insurance and benefits package to say, let's talk 401k, let's talk retirement. We've increased percentages with our 401k just as some of the techniques to kind of get us over the hurdles there. Do I think any of those are unique and creative? No, but I do think it gets back to basics and doing things that people expect when they go to work. I mean, it's not 1960. You don't go to work, punch a card for 30 years, go home and collect a pension. Now you go to work, you work hard, and you try to maintain a social life and balance your home life and the things of that nature. And having a company help make your life better because you work there is something that we strive for.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned like wages only go so far when it comes to attracting new workers and then keeping them around, right? Especially if a larger competitor down the road, goes up 50 cents. I've heard people losing workers over slight gains like that. And sort of those intangible pieces of showing you care and that you're there as a long-term employer, or at least longer-term employer, feels like it's critical.
Yeah. I mean, what I'll say to all that too, before we move on to another question, is like the biggest takeaway is that retention is the best recruiting tool we have at our disposal.
Yeah, I know people always want to reference culture as being the big differentiator to keep workers around. It's a great word to talk about in theory, but I mean, in your experience, how do you create a culture within the warehouse walls that people want to come back to?
Sometimes it's tough and sometimes it's easy. First and foremost, I will say that every person I've ever met, you, me, we are no different in the sense that we all have a cash to BS ratio. Like, I would put on a Tyvek suit and I will clean the sewer for the right amount of money. Everybody will do. They have a threshold that they'll meet. And when it comes to building culture, I can go back to when I was a distribution center manager many moons ago. And I took over a building that was like 800,000 square feet, almost 500 employees in Columbus, Ohio. And it was in total disarray. And it was quickly trying to identify some commonalities to unify the team together. And it was difficult. I mean, you had recruiting problems, turnover problems, technology problems, continuity of knowledge, tribal knowledge lacking, and so many more things. That the unifying factor there was accountability. So there was poisonous leadership, holding them accountable, exiting them from the business to gain the trust of the people, and then finding something they could get behind, which in the case of this team, they got behind the community. So we did a lot of different community facing events, like we did fundraising for the kidney, the Kidney Association. We did clothing drives for an organization in Columbus called Joseph's Coat. And we did a couple others, in the years that I was there, but that kind of brought people together. Like, we were able to share fellowship behind one cause. It wasn't just a pizza as a unifying party. Like, we could get together, we could have some food together, we could celebrate the win together, and even making it fun with interdepartmental challenges. Like, we took a toilet out of inventory. This company was an MRO distributor. Took a toilet out of inventory, put it together, spray painted it pink, and whatever department donated the most money towards putting it in another department, it had to sit in that department for 24 hours so they could talk trash about why do you have the pink toilet. And the real winner at the end of the day in that event was the Kidney Foundation, because they were the ones getting the money to pay it forward. But we got to have fun taking pictures and laughing at, with one another, not at one another. And it just built a camaraderie. And the result was that a culture was born of it. I mean, culture is just a fun term that I put around a positive work environment where people are treated the way they want to be treated. You go to work, you expect to work. It's a 4-letter word. We get it. However, you go there with the intent of doing a job, with the expectation of being in a thanked and rewarded environment. It needs to be clean and safe. You want to do work that's quality work that has a purpose, and you want to be trusted. You want an environment of universal trust. It's not much more difficult than that. Add some plus symbols, draw a line underneath it, and that equals a holistic team.
Yeah, I love creative ideas like that. I mean, it's something you can only come up with within your specific environment, knowing your workers, right? Like we talked to someone who did a wiffle ball competition or things along those lines to just try to break the ice every once in a while, bring departments together, especially breaking down the walls between, operations workers and, folks who are up in management.
100%, especially when you can get representatives from each group on the team and create like a planning committee, employer of choice team, whatever you want to label it. When everybody's coming together and sharing the synergies, you really get the creativity out there. I mean, Walt Disney was known of saying you draw creativity from diversity, and you take a diversified team like that and put them in a room, you're going to get some pretty good ideas.
Awesome. All right. Well, the last question I had for you, obviously, I know you're involved with plenty of organizations that give back to the warehouse and logistics community. What would be your advice for someone who is currently a warehouse manager or even a warehouse associate who wants to work their way up to a senior leadership position like yourself in the operations space?
That's a good question, because there's so many different facets that we could talk about. But for an individual that may be listening and reflecting on their leadership journey, I recommend that they embrace the concept of becoming a lifelong learner, and they never pass up the opportunity to seek out feedback. Said differently, you have to know yourself and strive to know yourself better over time. So a short story here, right? So after 15 years in the Army, I participated in more leadership training courses than I can even remember. But the thing that stood out the most to me during a pre-command process was being put through a barrage of personality tests. Like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Hogan, and there's like so many others that were a part of it. Like, I looked at the results of those. I learned a lot about who I was, how I would be perceived by others. And then I combined that with feedback received from others like senior leaders, peers, junior leaders, and most importantly, my wife, all of whom had reflections to share on my performance as a leader. So it helped me to better understand myself. And I spent a lot of time reflecting on that feedback with, those people who know me best. And this reflection, it's allowed me to understand my strengths and weaknesses as a leader, which further enabled me to understand how I would approach a situation or how I'd react to an issue and what steps I should take to avoid making poor decisions and to avoid making myself, or God forbid, even worse, my team look goofy. So like when you're honest with yourself about who you are, what your capabilities are, you learn how to better surround yourself with the right people who will in turn make you a better leader. And the result is that you will not only grow other leaders, but people will notice, enabling your career journey to go in the direction you want it to go, even if it means staying in the role that you're in. People will notice when you inspire others. And if you're self-aware of what you can and can't do and what your teams can and can't do, that's the lifelong learner. That's the inspiration, because people will get behind you because they know you won't hang them out to dry just to take care of yourself. And when you put yourself out there for your team, they're usually willing to give you a little bit more because they're vested in you and you're invested in them.
Awesome. Well, last question I have for you here. I know you may not have a Q4 peak coming up, but what are you hearing from your coworkers, from others in your network around what they're expecting for this upcoming fall peak?
I mean, this isn't even a fair question, right? There's a tough environment out there, economically speaking. And I was having a conversation recently with two of my friends, both work in different logistics firms. And I got two very different responses about this question. And as you can imagine, each had their own unique opinion about the economy. One friend is going through an operation expansion right now. His business is based in South Carolina, and now they're adding a few 100,000 square feet of space in the Savannah area to grow the business. It's a new market for them, and they're growing leaps and bounds. And then I have another friend that, she's evaluating her DC operation. She's 5 DCs because their operating income is down, and they're going to have to make the decision to close one of these distribution centers because they're not selling enough product to pay the bills. So, I mean, there's no universal answer as to what to expect in Q4, considering I'm naturally a skeptic. But one thing I'm certain of is that I'm optimistic on how my fellow logisticians will respond to the challenges presented by the economy. Whether it's too much inventory in DCs, lagging ocean transit times, shortage of shipping supplies, labor challenges, and many other different types of things that'll fit into that picture. But operations and logistics folks always seem to find a way to make things happen and keep businesses running.
Yeah, you nailed it. In the operations world, there's never a similar year, right? It's always changing, always need to adapt. And hopefully you're ahead of things in your role there at Kitchen Cabinet Distributors. And that's the end of this week's edition of the Ops Leader Roundtable. Again, really thankful to Glen Wegel for joining us, sharing some of his insights and expertise from a long career in the logistics and operations space. So thanks again, Glen.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.